A man sits at the beach, staring pensively over the water. In one ear and out the other flutters the small talk of his immediate company in the wake of his intense focus. A shriek issues from the glistening pool of blue, and the man jerks to his feet. But it's merely a woman playing with her boyfriend. Children flock to the water. The man tells Harry he has some bad hat. A boy sits, singing to himself, while building a sandcastle. A teen calls out for his dog. Below the calm surface of the water, legs flail playfully as if performing some sort of tantalizing, synchronized dance. The next moment, a shadowy creature pulls a boy on a raft down. Down, down. There's red. So much red spreading everywhere. What was that?
Everybody out! Get out of the water!
There are certain things that just scream summer. The sun, the sand, and the surf, just to name a few. Thanks to pop culture, it's kind of impossible not to think about what's lurking below those waves. Just in time for the hottest months of the year, we, here at the Houston Museum of Natural Science, have taken a bite out of Hollywood hysteria with sharks, the megs, the monsters, and the myths. A new exhibit exploring these incredible yet misunderstood creatures. We're also taking a deep dive into the mystery surrounding these fantastic fish in a 2-part special that unravels fact from the fiction and uncovers the tooth, the whole tooth, and nothing but the tooth about sharks. Now, let's just dive in and get this out of the way because we're all thinking it. The Spielberg classic Jaws took a bite out of theaters in 1975. The iconic film would cement the general public's unfortunate perception of sharks for generations to come. And honestly, mine too. I personally harbored a legitimate fear of any body of water bigger than a bathtub for years. What about you, Emma?
I know exactly what you mean, Johnny. I mean, I didn't see the film in 1975, but I can tell you exactly where I was the first time I saw that animatronic shark pop his head out of the water. And yeah, it was at night. It was in a living room with my friends, and I think I threw my popcorn into the air.
We know we're not alone in this either. We'd wager the odds are quite high that the majority of you listening had or still currently have a fear of the deep based on dramatized or utterly sensationalized depictions of our toothy subject, or the Kraken. But we can't really help you out with that. We can shed light on some shark myths though, so let's just start there. And since sharks give everyone the willies, we brought in the mother of all experts to help. The mother of sharks herself, Melissa Cristina Marquez. Melissa is one of the world's foremost and most prolific shark experts. She's been on National Geographic, Discovery Channel, and too many shows and publications to list in one podcast.
Valerie Taylor and her husband, so 2 Australians who actually helped with the creation of Bruce, the mechanical shark that you saw in Jaws, and took some of the footage of actual sharks that you saw on there. She said that they actually had to fly back to the States and do talks about shark conservation, how, you know, these animals aren't as horrible as the movie portrayed them to be because people were actually so terrified. So yeah, Jaws was definitely a turning point that just plummeted people's perceptions of sharks.
On top of that, before his death, Peter Benchley, the author behind Jaws, in case you didn't already know it was a book before it was a movie, admitted he wished he never wrote the book because of how it ended up demonizing sharks, which is pretty yikes.
Even still, Melissa says our fear of sharks dates back even further, to the time of the early Greeks.
Sharks have kind of been demonized for such a long time. There's folklore all around the world where sharks can be seen in this kind of unfavorable light, where they're seen as animals that are being sicked on by the gods as a tool of vengeance, or the shark god itself is actually something that kills people or hunts people. And then you kind of bring it down to the more modern ways, and World War II was actually the first time that you really start to see that kind of fear fear of sharks, because you've got all these moms from the middle of the US sending their kids off to the Navy and hearing these stories about sharks and never having seen a shark. You see these caricatures of sharks, and that's where it kind of starts to build up.
So by the time Jaws hits theaters in 1975, there's already this undercurrent of shark fear in society. All it needed was the right wave to ride to shore.
And boy, did it. Back in 2021, researchers found that the number of sharks in our open oceans had plunged by 71% over the last 50 years. Let's just hop in the dinghy of irony for a few moments, shall we? Free Willy. This 90s classic, it was one of my favorite movies, was about a cuddly orca. Killer whales, or orca, literally hunt and kill white sharks. Heck, they literally hunted and killed the mighty megalodon, possibly to extinction, at least partly. Did you catch that? Orca may have literally killed so many freaking megalodons that it accelerated the Meg's actual extinction from this planet. Orca hunted and killed megalodon the same way they hunt and kill white sharks, by ramming and flipping the sharks upside down to trigger a almost comatose state, then rip them apart with little to no resistance, sometimes just eating the liver and leaving the rest to rot in the ocean. Brutal.
And yet, the killer whale was turned into a cultural teddy bear, and their victims were psychologically manufactured into demonic, bloodthirsty monsters. Absolutely insane when you think about it.
Orca are some of the most ruthless killers in the animal kingdom. They are extremely intelligent and will often toy with their prey before eating it, careful to injure it just enough without killing it until they've finished playing with their food. Orca in captivity have killed 4 people since the 1970s, and 3 of them by one orca alone, named Tilikum.
Let's be fair though. We're not trying to dump on killer whales. In fact, there are no known fatal orca attacks on humans in the wild, and some attribute Tilikum's 4 deaths to be a direct result of the psychological effects he endured living in captivity for so long. That iconic limp dorsal fin? That's the dead giveaway an orca is depressed or unwell. The fact remains, however, that orca are meticulous and methodical killers of the animal kingdom. Yet they enjoy the cute and cuddly treatment from Hollywood.
Meanwhile, sharks were made into the bloodthirsty villain, not just in Jaws, but across countless films and TV shows. Such a bad rap that governments around the world have had to step in and directly legislate protection for these animals in response to deliberately manufactured negative public perception. Welcome to the Jaws effect. As Dr. Christopher Neff, a public policy professor in Sydney, Australia, who studied the phenomenon extensively, put it.
To summarize, the Jaws effect posits that because of the movie and productions like it, people believe that sharks intentionally bite humans, that these interactions are always fatal, and that sharks should be culled to stop the threat of these interactions. Of course, governments intervening on behalf of sharks is a recent event.
Since we've already mentioned Down Under, Australia enacted its own shark culling initiatives as late as 2014. Shark culling, mind you, is scientifically unproven to have any effect on the number of shark encounters with humans. It is purely reactionary to the manufactured fear surrounding the Jaws effect.
Look, the thing with shark culling is that you are most likely not going to catch the shark that ended up biting the person for the top 3 species. So tiger sharks, bull sharks, and great white sharks. Those are the ones that are most implicated in shark bites around the world, according to the International Shark Attack File. And those animals are all migratory. They move, they have long, big ranges. And so by the time you actually get anything in motion, that shark's probably gone. I mean, we saw it here in Western Australia where they had their shark culling project, which was actually quite controversial. They were killing tons of sharks that were innocent. And so, no, I am of the belief that shark culling is not effective whatsoever when it comes to protecting people from sharks.
And if you're wondering, here in the US, fear from Spielberg's film led directly to the rise of shark trophy hunting, which is still a thing.
Actually, the number one threat to sharks is overfishing. When it comes to nets, hooks, and traps, sharks are collateral damage to the tune of tens of millions per year. You know what? Let's talk some highly unfortunate yet extremely fascinating numbers, shall we? First, let's start with what we're all wondering. How many humans are killed by sharks each year? Drum roll. 5. 5 people per year on average are killed by sharks. 5. Who of us hasn't been to a 4th of July party? Well, fireworks and the phrase, "hold my beer," don't really mix too great. So much so that 10 times more people are killed by fireworks than by sharks. On the other side of the spectrum from hot explosives, hundreds of times more people succumb to the icy jaws of Jack Frost than they do the jaws of a shark. Look at your sweet family puppy. You're actually up to 10 times more likely to be killed by Fido in your own home than by a shark when you go to the beach. Just going by the numbers, domestic dogs kill up to 50 people per year, while sharks kill 5.
See, Johnny, this would never happen with the cat. They're too busy sitting on your lap complaining that you're starving them to death because you've only fed them 12 dinners so far this evening. Oh wait, is that only my cat?
Well, Emma, I wish I had some crazy, deadly domestic cat stat to throw at you right now, but I don't. About 11 people have been killed over the past 10 years, and that's literally just from diseases the cat dragged in. I'm not even trying to be funny. That's the reason the CDC attributes human fatalities to domestic cats. But, let's move on.
And while we're at it, let's take a moment and look at that famous Jaws shark. The man-eating monster we're so terrified of. We asked Melissa, what did this iconic movie get completely wrong?
Probably the first myth of the Jaws shark is that it's hunting people. That's definitely the biggest misconception of sharks. You have to remember at the end of the day that we're not on the menu for them, despite what the narrative around shark bites or shark attacks are. So that's probably the biggest misconception, the biggest myth of the Jaws shark.
And we probably don't taste good anyway.
No. I mean, if you think about it, what they normally eat, especially like a big great white shark, would be a mammal that has a lot of blubber, a lot of fat, high calorie kind of muscles and stuff like that. And I'm sorry, but no person is ever going to be big enough or rich enough for them to reach their caloric intake or their needs, their nutritional needs through eating a person. We're not on the menu for them. We're not the right fit for them.
Plus, with all that processed food we're putting into our bodies, we're about as far from organic, all natural as you can get. Talk about gross. Oh, and if you still weren't sure that the Jaws shark is really just a cinematic creation, Melissa says shark interest in humans is subjective. Sure, some are curious about us, but a lot don't want to give us the time of day. Meanwhile, hammerheads in the Galapagos aren't fans of bubbles and really dislike the noise scuba units produce, so they tend to avoid people. But here's something kinda interesting. Sharks have been known to be friendly with people on occasion. Some even recognize certain individuals and form special connections. Seriously, nicknamed the friendliest shark in the world, Blondie, an 8-foot, 200-pound Florida lemon shark, regularly seeks out local area divers for cuddles. She'll even scare off other sharks if she feels they're getting too close to her human crew. And Blondie's not a lone fish in the sea here. Wild tiger shark Emma has been friends with diver Jim Abernathy for over 20 years. Anytime he swims in the Bahamas, she seeks him out for a little TLC. Even when the pair was separated for a year by the pandemic, when Jim returned to the water, Emma recognized his boat and came a-callin'. How about that for breaking the Jaws myth?
Let's turn the tables now. How many sharks do humans kill each year? It's actually 100 million. It's almost impossible impossible to comprehend.
An estimated 100 million sharks are killed every year around the world, and that's a number that far exceeds what populations need to recover. The biggest threat that sharks face is overfishing, which makes the statistics really grim because, again, when you think about how endangered these animals are and the very, very real and looming and increasing pressure of overfishing and bycatch, which is when you're not specifically trying to catch the shark, but you're catching it because you're targeting other animals and they happen to be in the same area or something like that, you've got a really big issue. So yeah, quite a large number of sharks are being killed every year.
So, needless to say, sharks do not deserve the outlandish fear we attribute to them. The human condition is fascinating. We tend to ignore the habits and scenarios that overwhelmingly increase our chances of death. And then we turn around and worry about scenarios with virtually impossible odds of getting hurt. It's actually almost statistically impossible that anyone who hears my voice right now will be bitten by a shark, let alone killed by one. You are more likely to drown in the ocean. Heck, you're more likely to drown during your bubble bath than even get bitten non-fatally by a shark. Now let's just hold on, pump the brakes a little bit here. We're not trying to overly scare you. We're just painting the picture that sharks aren't worth your worry, but they are worth our admiration.
There are over 500 unique species of shark. The dwarf lantern shark is as small as your hand, and while in terms of size, we tend to imagine the white shark at up to 20 feet long, we often, at least temporarily, forget about the gentle giant whale shark that can grow to a staggering 61 feet long, about the length of a bowling alley lane.
And not all sharks look like that classic Jaws shark either. Take Melissa's favorite family of sharks, the rough shark.
They kind of look like wontons with some fins added to them, so they're very like triangular shaped, very pudgy, don't get around like moving really quickly or anything like that. Of course, you've got nurse sharks, angel sharks, which are super flat, look like a pancake. It looks like as if someone took a regular shark and sort of like just smushed it with a roller.
Sharks are known as apex predators. They, along with orca, sit, or should I say swim, atop the ocean food chain, and yet they occupy the entire depth of the ocean. From thousands of feet below the surface in pitch black, unfathomable pressure, like the Portuguese dogfish, which lives over 12,000 feet under the waves, to hammerheads, which can dive down to about 1,000 feet but typically stay near the surface. Speaking of diversity, just like birds that have different beaks and features catering to different uses and diets, the hammerhead we just mentioned uses its uniquely shaped head to pin down and eat its favorite prey, stingrays. Meanwhile, the saw shark has a long chainsaw-shaped bill, or rostrum, lined on both sides with sharp teeth that it uses to dislodge and catch prey from along the ocean floor. Most sharks are actually cold-blooded, while some sharks, like the white shark, is partially warm-blooded. Scientists theorize that it adapted this trait to help the large animal better utilize its muscles for extra speed at catching prey.
Yeah, exactly that. It's that hunting kind of superpower.
But also to enable the ability to traverse colder waters.
A few different species, the laminid sharks, that have this kind of unique system that's called a counter current heat exchange that actually keeps their body warmer than the outside water temperature. It basically gives the sharks that have that a sort of edge when it comes to actually being able to hunt. So yeah, I think it's really interesting that they've got this sort of superpower.
Back to the wide, flat skull of the hammerhead. It also houses another feature common to all sharks, a sixth sense. All sharks have cells called ampullae of Lorenzini that actually sense the electrical fields around other animals in the water. We'll let HMNS VP of Education and resident shark expert Nicole Temple explain.
The reason why they have those is basically for hunting and like situational awareness. So in the case of sharks that like actually go after prey, so let's just use the white shark for example, in the last seconds before they go to bite something, they have these nictitating membranes that roll up over their eyelids. eyelids, and it effectively renders them blind. So they can't see if their prey shifts one way or the other. So by having those ampullae of Lorenzini, then it allows them to know which way to turn their head at the last second.
So not only can sharks detect the electricity of living creatures, but they can also feel how other creatures affect water pressure.
There's a line of pores that runs down either side of shark species, and they can figure out and determine water pressure changes using those lateral lines as well. So there's many different senses that sharks use.
When it comes to super sharky powers, many shark species can actually emit light, much like a firefly. In fact, bioluminescence is extremely common among ocean creatures, and this of course includes sharks.
One, it's such a cool thing. Like, who doesn't want to glow in the dark? But between the denticles, which are pretty tightly packed, they have these little pores, these little cells, and in those holes, they're able to create these chemicals that sort of come together, like when you snap a glow stick. They mix together and they produce this light. But on the top of the little pore, the little cell, they have a guanine crystal. It acts as a way to cap the little cell and keep the chemicals on the inside, but because it's a crystal, it also amplifies the light. So like if you've ever been camping and you've shown a flashlight into your water bottle to like make a makeshift lantern, that's what it's doing. The next part that's crazy is the thing that makes it glow brighter is melatonin. So in us, it makes us sleepy. In the sharks, it has a totally different effect. It's one of those things where scientists didn't know what they were looking for until they started looking for it. So they went from having like one little shark that was crazy and it glowed in the dark, and now they're finding more and more and more and more.
While we're talking about amazing shark adaptations, let's chum the water with another myth. Melissa, can sharks really smell a single drop of blood in miles of open ocean?
You know, it has been a bit over exaggerated, that claim. Sharks have incredible senses, but drop a mile away, probably not.
Here's something else absolutely mind-blowing. Sharks are older than dinosaurs. Way older. Dinosaurs first appeared around 230 million years ago, while sharks first appeared over 400 million years ago. Now, if you've ever wondered why scientists don't really find much fossilized shark bone, it's because they don't have any bones. Yep. When they die, their cartilage skeletons biodegrade, leaving only teeth behind, for the most part. And speaking of old, some can live a really long time. While white sharks can live a respectable 70 years or so, the Greenland shark needs just a couple more birthday candles, living as long as an estimated 500 years. The oldest documented Greenland shark still alive is believed to have been born as early as 1504. You know what else happened in 1504? Well, in 1504, Christopher Columbus used his astronomy almanac to swindle indigenous Jamaican people by convincing them he could turn the moon blood red. Well, a Greenland shark was alive for that eclipse and is still cruising the ocean today. That's just wild. We had another interesting question for Melissa that had been puzzling us for a while now. This question about white sharks again. Melissa, why don't we see white sharks in some form of captivity?
We've tried. Scientists have tried. Monterey Bay Aquarium is probably the most famous example of having great white sharks in that sort of captive environment. And even then, it wasn't per se in like a tank. It was actually in an outdoor sort of setting. There's so much that we don't know about these animals still. And so some animals just don't belong in captivity. You know, great white sharks, very similar to orcas that we've now seen with this kind of uprise after blackfish. They travel hundreds of thousands of kilometers in, you know, a day, in a few weeks, in a few days, a few months. And so them being confined to a small area, it's just not conducive for them. And what was found with a lot of the captive great white sharks is that they kept banging themselves into the edges of the glass or the edges of the containment unit that they were in, and it was just not conducive to their living standards, essentially. And so for the betterment of the animal, for the safety of the animal, it just hasn't really been done again.
From the white to the hammerhead and the dwarf lantern, sharks come in all shapes and sizes. over 500 species of them. But here's the thing, 143 of those species are critically endangered.
If not more. That number is always increasing.
That's a pretty big deal given everything sharks do for the planet.
And I mean, it's got everything from balancing the food web to actually moving nutrients around depending on like what they eat. So say for example, you've got reef sharks who are patrolling a coral reef, and with their movements, they go offshore, they hunt animals there, they come back. Well, eventually they're going to have to do excrement. They're going to have to poop. And that poop actually acts as fertilizer for the coral reef from nutrients of another part of the ocean that the coral reef would normally not get. The presence of sharks themselves actually sways the flow of an ecosystem. So some animals might not be in a certain part of the reef during a certain part of the day because sharks are patrolling that area. And if they're herbivorous fish, that actually allows for any kind of plant matter to survive, to thrive in that area. So very, very important ecologically speaking, economically speaking. I mean, they bring in billions of dollars worldwide through shark ecotourism. And culturally speaking, I mean, they're priceless. There's so many cultures around the world where sharks are such an important part of their belief system that you can't put a price on that.
So what can we do both at the beach or hundreds of miles inland to help protect these magnificent animals?
One of the biggest things that people can do is talk about sharks in a different way. Think about how they're talking about these animals, and are they perpetuating stereotypes that are steeped in falsehoods? Volunteering your time for organizations that are promoting shark conservation or shark education, I think is really important, as well as if you can donate money. That's also really important in helping not only promote those organizations, but also any organization or business that is doing shark research. That's a great way of helping as well. And then of course, sharing research that is out there about sharks, or sharing books that are about sharks from shark scientists or anything like that. I think there's so much that we can do, even if you live in the middle of nowhere and are not surrounded by ocean for miles and miles and miles.
Nicole adds,
The number one thing that you can do, which is easy and you will have already done it by coming to this exhibit, is educate yourself, because the more you know about something, the more likely you are to protect it. And then the other thing is try and reduce your consumption of things that you don't need to. If like even doing something as simple as using reusable shopping bags, like you're keeping plastic out of the environment. Not all your vegetables need to go in extra little bags. These are easy things. Recycle what you can, and then be aware of what you're getting. So for example, you can go online and look it up, but a lot of beauty products used to, and some of them still do, have shark oil in them, and that is a major ingredient and a major reason why sharks get harvested from the ocean. And then also a lot of times shark is the generic fish that you're getting at the store. So they've done research studies showing that endangered sharks have shown up in fish and chip shops in England, or they've been mislabeled intentionally at the grocery store. So make sure that you are looking for something that is ethical.
If it isn't clear already, it's safe to say that sharks are wildly fascinating creatures. Thousands of times more factually interesting than they are speculatively terrifying.
The truth, as they say, will set you free. Truth removes fear. The truth about sharks casts away erroneous preconceptions and leaves the mind open to the glory of wonder. The glory of these beautiful animals' magnificence, and a passion to protect these invaluable creatures at all costs. You've been listening to Sharks, Truth Be Told, a podcast from the Houston Museum of Natural Science. Our podcast team is Johnny Hemberger
and Emma Schloven.
Special thanks to guests Melissa Marquez and Nicole Temple.
When we return for the second half of our Shark two-parter, we'll take a giant bite out of Megalodon, the prehistoric predator of all predators.
Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next episode.
Thank you for listening, and stay curious.